Welcome to Season 2 of Next of Kin, the podcast. I'm your host Emma, a British expat who moved to Dubai to further my fashion career when a positive pregnancy test rocked my world. I was asked to choose between my career or my baby, so I realised I needed to pivot and fast. And that's where Next of Kin comes in. Last season, you followed along as I muddled through my first year as a mum and starting my first business. Now I have a toddler, a brand, and this podcast. So join me this season as I jump into my mumpreneur era and try to figure out whether we can really have it all. I'm well aware that great practical advice is hard to come by, so that's why I invited this week's guest, Beth Clay, onto the podcast to set us straight when it comes to our finances. Beth is really passionate about her mission to empower women through her company, Finance Her Well, to build wealth. I've been lucky enough to chat to Beth before and also hear her speak about everything money related, so I know she is just so knowledgeable and I really trust her advice. She's not a financial advisor, she's actually a coach, and she covers an array of things under the umbrella of financial coaching. And you can work with her from an online course to one-to-one coaching. She also does corporate work as well. Finance Her Well is also a young enterprise in itself, so it's lovely to speak to someone super relatable who gets the struggles of starting a business. You'll hear me dive straight in to the deep end with the practical advice when it comes to budgeting and starting a business. But I actually really enjoy the mindset and the psychology aspect to what Beth does, so make sure you keep listening for that. That's my favourite part of the episode. At the end of the episode, she gives a very kind shout out to Next of Kin, the brand, and I realised that I haven't actually shared with you guys about my new Mum Supporting Mums initiative. I've hand-selected some small local mum-owned baby and kids brands to join me on the Next of Kin website, nextofkin.ae, and I'm hoping to become a one-stop shop for those looking for kids' clothes or gifts, but wanting to shop small and support local, so please check that out. And without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Beth, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Please, can you introduce yourself for the podcast listeners?
Hi, Emma. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Clay and I'm the founder of Finance Her Well.
Can we start with the really practical stuff, which is the budgeting? Because I've had a few questions lately about how to know when to quit your job, how to budget for starting a business. And I know that you're going to have so much advice, not just for those that want to start a business, but generally there's probably a lot of budgeting going on if you're bringing a child into the family.
There really is. I think you've totally touched on that there, Emma. There's so many different times in our lives when we need to budget. And one of the things I really think about when I talk to a lot of kind of clients around this is really mapping out financial goals. And the reason I say that is there's different financial goals that we have in life. And actually having a child is one of those financial goals. So is obviously getting married, buying a car, and also setting up a business, as you've outlined there. And the reason why we kind of think about them in sort of, like I say, not necessarily a goal as such, but we're able to then think around how much do we want to set aside for that. And I think one of the things, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that in terms of maternity leave and having a child, obviously it's mapping out, thinking there, what are the expenses that I need without, particularly if you have a salary as well, prior to going on maternity leave, thinking about how much you need to set aside, but what are your absolute expenses that you're going to need whilst you're off, and then trying to make a plan as best as possible to do that. I mean, obviously there's only a certain amount of months that you can plan that for, but that's why I kind of talk about financial goals in that sense, because you can start mapping out how much you'll need in that part and then work backwards, because then you can think about, okay, I know realistically this is how much I need to set aside each month for that particular goal. And the same applies to a business that you mentioned there as well. So I call that saving up for the Freedom Fund. So that can apply to lots of different things in your life, but particularly setting up a business or moving out of the corporate job into that. And particularly a general rule of thumb is around about 6 months of living expenses, really, if you can think about. And that's really where you would really need to go into a budget, map out your wants. I talk about your needs, wants, and your savings. So the best way to do this is what I call the 50-30-20 rule, and 50% that applies to your needs. So that's what you cannot live without. So your rent, mortgages, obviously running the car, schooling, food, all those things. And then your wants, obviously, and that's an area where you may need to kind of negotiate a little bit or dip into a little bit more. But, the general things that bring us joy as well, eating out and those kind of other areas. And then where we can try and get to that 20%, which is where you'll be kind of putting aside that money, if you can, each month for whatever goal it is that you're saving for. So that's a general kind of rule of thumb. And it's kind of working through that and actually trying to, and it's quite useful in this exercise. I've got a budget planner as well that people can use that really sets this out and kind of where you can put all those different categories in, and it really does help get you a little bit closer to that mark.
So that's your 50, 30, 20 rule, right? And you can send me the link and maybe I can put that below in the show notes, your link to the budget tracker, because that would be really useful. And what's the rule of thumb when you're thinking about budgeting to start a business? How long should business owners expect not to be taking an income?
Well, that's when we talk about the 6 months in particular, the minimum a lot of people say at least 6 to 9 months, really, if you can get to that. No, that's a lot. That is quite a lot to save up for. But it depends what sort of business naturally that you're going to be looking to set up for, but really thinking around at least 6 to 9 months, really, in that sense. They do say rule of thumb, if you're thinking about leaving your job, for instance, and want to get out of that job or do something different, is a lot smaller, so like 3 to 6 months. But certainly if you're going to be self-employed, over 6 months, really, just to give yourself those needs. And obviously it's different as well, because you've got to factor in your living costs. And, you may be in a relationship and where you can lean more heavily on your partner for a while, but you've also got to think about what are those actual costs that I need to set up the business. Now, it depends if you're in a product-based business, in which case, obviously, is the upfront cost to think about there. And then, obviously, it's a bit different with the service-based business, but either way, there's all the different trainings and things like that you need to kind of factor in as well. So there's quite a few big costs, and I think that's where you really sit down and really work through how much do I actually what is my business going to look like? And what are those upfront costs that I realistically, I absolutely have to put down. And like you say, even in Dubai, obviously we need to think about licenses and obviously thinking about some of those other costs. Perhaps you might need to obviously have your visa. It depends who you're going to be sponsored by. So there's lots of those little bits that you need to think about, certainly. But it's not to say it's, for some people think, oh my goodness, am I ever going to get to 6 to 9 months? But it's, as I said, it's a lot easier when you think through, set your budget now. What is it? What are the things that you can perhaps cut down on if you were to go self-employed or set up your own business? And what are the things what are the absolute things, the absolute essentials? For instance, rent, you can't get out of that. So it's really thinking about those costs and making sure that you have at least those 6 months.
Yeah. And I think when you're looking at starting a business as well, it's quite easy to plan the sort of bare minimum costs, but actually we really shouldn't do that. And we probably need to add on 20% to whatever it is that we're budgeting, because it's always so much. There's always unexpected costs that you're not going to have thought of.
Absolutely. No, you're totally right. There really is. And I mean, I say that in the everyday as well. When you do your budget as well, one of the things I talk about is having the emergency fund. And everyone's like, what's the emergency fund? And it's really important to have this set pot of money for everything unexpected, because a lot of people don't have it, and then they kind of, something comes along and they're like, oh, that's okay, right, I'm having to eat into those savings that I've been saving up to buy that car or whatever, or saving up for whatever, the deposit for the house or whatever it is that you've been saving for, and then suddenly you have to dip into that, or naturally go on a credit card. And if you don't feel like you're comfortable paying off the balance each month, that can then tally up as well. But yeah, that's very much kind of the emergency fund sits outside of that for those things that happen, like car breakdowns, air conditioning, things. And I always find, oh goodness, since being out here, there's so many things that have happened to them, and I didn't see that one coming. I'm glad I had the emergency fund for that. Oh my goodness, our car literally probably broken about 3 or 4 times since we had got it last February. I'm like, I thought the Pajeros were supposed to be stable cars, but no.
I think for expats as well, we need to be very realistic about, I've just seen so many people at the moment that lose their jobs and their life is here and they don't have anything to fall fall back on. So you really need that emergency fund, even if you're just about to move to a new country. I feel like you need that behind you
100%.
for if you need to like quickly move back for some reason.
You definitely do. And I think you're totally right. And I think quite a few people sometimes rely on the gratuity and think, oh, I'll finish my job and I'll use that gratuity to get me back. But actually, there are a lot of things that, and I've heard of stories of people, obviously, who've left jobs and then that gratuity suddenly is paying off whatever loan that's happened behind the scenes. So therefore, there isn't anything left. So you're totally right. I think it's always important to have in your back pocket that amount of money that if you need to get out, you need to suddenly go back for a family emergency, whatever the reason is, always have that pot of money set aside for whatever emergency and those things. And like you said, I mean, goodness, like the amount of costs, unexpected costs moving out here, like you said, but moving back as well, it's definitely to account for all those things and setting up your life back in another country as well. Like when you think about all those additional like deposits and everything else, it's going to take time. And sometimes it might take time to get the deposits back out the house that you're in here and those other areas. So it's definitely worth, like you said, building up that fund that's going to support you for whatever life throws you, really.
Yeah. And for anyone that's listening that isn't in the UAE, the gratuity is like a payment you get here when you leave a company. But we also don't have an automatic pension system here. So really, I always feel like I should use that gratuity to go. I mean, I didn't. I used it for living expenses whilst I set up a business. But for me, I kept thinking to myself, oh, that will be my pension pot at the end. But we don't think of that sometimes as expats here, do we? Because we kind of don't have to.
No, you're right. Yes. And this is a lot of the kind of things I've talked about with people as well, is that I think people naturally think, oh, that gratuity perhaps will be my pension pot. But more likely, there probably is a higher percentage of people probably that gratuity pot, like you said, often people need that to put the first check down on the next house or setting up those costs that you need. So that money kind of comes at that time when we really need it for whatever reason it is. So it is really important. I talk a lot about investing and starting to think about putting aside a little bit of money now into an investment fund to support you with that retirement when you do, wherever you decide to retire, whether it's here or back in your home country as well. And naturally, obviously, in the UK, there's, insurance, national insurance to pay into. So it's important to try and see whether you can do that as well whilst you're out here. So sign up for that if you can, but obviously that's related to people from the UK. But otherwise, making sure that you have a certain amount of money that's going into an investment or a pot of money that's going to support you later on in the life, because it really, really is important for that.
Yeah, I'm sure we could have a whole podcast on investing, couldn't we? But what I really want to talk to you about today is the more emotional side of things, the mindset side, because this is something I've really been considering lately. And I actually think I want to focus on this a bit more when I've got time over summer. So you are going to kick off my journey here, Beth, with money mindset. What do we mean when we say money mindset? What's it all about?
So it's all about the way that we approach money. And a lot of it is kind of related to the psychology of money, the way that our brains think when we, for whatever reason, we kind of think about when money comes into our lives. And we often talk about in terms of different mindsets of the scarcity mindset or the abundant mindset. And obviously the ideal is to get into the abundant mindset where we feel like money, we attract money, it comes to us. We don't need to worry about it. It'll naturally, whatever we put our efforts into, money will come our way. And that's a really healthy mindset to get to. But a lot of us naturally are stuck in the more scarcity mindset, that fear of losing money, the fear of not being worthy of money, the fear that they'll never have enough money. So there's a lot of that. That's a lot of the kind of the way that our brains think and process information around money. And a lot of that comes from our beliefs and our attitudes and our behaviors. Even go, as I say, I love the psychology of money and thinking about it, but even going back for childhood and the ways in which we saw our parents handling money in the home, all the way through to kind of watching our peers, the way that they handle money. There's so many different influences along our way that impact the way that we feel and approach money. And obviously that natural mindset then has an impact on the rest of our life, which is why I talk quite a lot around financial wellness, because it's that sense of being in control of our finances and feeling like we've got that healthy mindset that really sets the rest of our life up.
Yeah, mentioning your childhood attitudes and what you've seen around the home there just made me think, is there anything that you're doing as a mum with your children, or an approach that you're taking as a mum to sort of set them up for this healthy money mindset?
Yeah, for sure. I think they actually do say that your mindset, the money mindset, is actually formed from the age of 5 to 7, which is, so it's actually really young. And I have a 5-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. The 3-year-old doesn't quite understand yet. But certainly with my eldest, Heidi, I very much have taught her a lot around, we can't just have that toy in that shop. We have to work for things, and we can't just have things for free. And part of that looked like the easiest example is like the tooth fairy. So she's lost a couple of teeth recently, and I said, okay, so here's a few dirhams, and you're going to save up those dirhams to buy something you want to buy, and you're going to take them down to the supermarket, and they're going to see what it is that you can buy for that amount of money. So she gets into those healthy habits of money is not just something that comes for free. It's a nice thing to have, and it feels healthy to have it, but there are things that happen to get the money. And this is obviously what we talk about as well. Like when I get conversations like, why are you always working? Why is daddy always working? Like, unfortunately, we do have to work, and we do have to sometimes sit behind a laptop because we're earning money. And we say to her, where do you think food comes from? Where do you think these nice toys come from? Well, from your bag. It comes from your bag. Yeah. Yes. So we're very much trying to do those things to kind of show that money is a useful tool. So it's not something to be scared of, but it's actually a tool that helps us get things in life. So that's where we're kind of talking about those attitudes now, and those encouraging those behaviors naturally. And obviously the further down we go, the older that she'll get, we'll talk through kind of other things in the household and how things are made, the bills and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's important to have those healthy, open relationships about money, so that they understand as they grow up what it's used for.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, because I think on the scale of, I don't know what the scale would be, but if I think about me and Rich, my mum's an accountant, and so she made me sit down and write out a budget of everything I would need. And she did this when I was probably about 11. And
Wow.
She was like, right, if you want to get your hair done, you've got to pay for school meals, all of this. She made me write it out. And then she was going to give me that as a monthly allowance, but I had to pay for everything. And I think that's a really useful lesson. However, when I wrote it all out, it came to much higher than she was expecting. And so I think she decided, I think the allowance was about £70. But actually, if you break that down, that's less than 20 quid a week. And I'm meant to be buying my school uniform, my school meals, everything. So that probably actually would have been a good exercise, but maybe pushed it too far for me to really be able to manage it.
It is getting the right balance, isn't it? But it's, hats off to your mum for that, though, because those lessons are important. And there's a lot that I'm a huge advocate of, making sure that we get financial literacy in schools and universities, because that's where those healthy habits, when we start using those and understanding what money can be used for, that really will set up our children in the next generation really so much better, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I even saw something online about someone was talking about a reason they'd sent their children to like a private school in the UK, but they were in primary school and they were learning about investing. And they were saying, wow, did you in the state school ever learn about investing? And I was like, nope. And it really made me think, whatever school we end up sending Bonnie to, that financial literacy early on and learning about investing, it's something I'm only coming around to in my 30s, let alone having that from when you're a child. It would be really beneficial. Yeah. When you're working with your coaching clients, then how do you work with them?
Yeah, so a lot of it depends. One of the things I kind of talk through clients is kind of asking them, how do they view money and how do they see money in their lives? And I get them to think about the kind of positive sides of money, but also what financial challenges they have, or what is that, how do they feel and approach money? And a lot of the times it will be, coming down to a lot of that scarcity mindset and working through ways in which, for some people, what I do tend to find is quite a lot of people say, I can't let go of this money. I'm so scared to lose it. And a lot of that takes time to say, okay, what's behind that? Why are you thinking that way? Or what do you think will happen if we do lose the money? And it's more kind of like coaching in that sense. Or sometimes it might be, I don't think I'm worthy of money. I don't think that I am deserving of money. I don't think it hasn't come my way so far, so I don't think I'll ever get it. And that's where we need to really work through why are you telling yourself that? What are these limiting beliefs? Where are they coming from? So then we can start addressing that and moving forward and actually seeing, like, being grateful for lots of things that happen in life outside of money, because it's when we start being grateful for all the great things that we have in life, then we can see money coming into, there's opportunities to build money and build wealth. And then we're more open to it. And there's quite a lot of studies around this as well that show about being, the gratitude and the openness to those opportunities. Money does come through different channels. And one of the other things, as I talk about with clients, is, learning to release money. And I know we've spoken about this, and it's something I'll be honest, I've been on my own journey with, for sure. Like, releasing money to get money back in. And that's quite a hard thing to kind of get your head around, to say, okay, I have to let this money go for instance, setting up the business, but actually it is going to come back to me tenfold. But it's kind of that first, like, okay, this is going to, and it's a lot of that kind of letting go and releasing that money to get the money back in, and seeing that investing in yourself and investing in those opportunities to build businesses is the best thing that you can do. And for sure, it is investing in yourself as those skills or what additional training and mentorship that you need that's going to get you to the next stage, and where you're going to get that more money coming through on those different ways. So there's many different ways. As I say, clients come to me in many different reasons. Sometimes it may be that they've got this pot of money. For instance, they want to buy a house and they've been sat on it for several years. They've had it there, but they're so scared to make that a first investment because it's something new. And there's that fear that, that's almost like that safety net. And sometimes it may be that they want to buy an asset, and once the asset's been bought, they need to see numbers on a screen. They need to see that savings pot, and how do we then build that savings pot up? So there's lots of different things that we kind of talk through and walk through in terms of where are those emotions coming from? How do we change them? How do we reframe them? And how do they set yourself up for those financial goals, and how we can get you to the next place?
Yeah. It's interesting because I had a conversation when I was leaving my job with my dad, actually, whereby I was saying that I've got a bit of savings in the bank, but I'd saved those savings for my whole life. And I didn't want to dip into them because I don't know. I don't know what I thought I was using them for. Probably buying a house, because that's what we're sort of trained to do. And I think he said to me, look, this seems like the kind of situation where you do dip into them, whether I start a business or whether, I leave my job and take an extended maternity leave just to be at home with Bonnie. This is the kind of situation that you save for, isn't it? But it's funny that we don't see that.
I think it's that fear sometimes, because you'll have probably been used to seeing that balance on a screen when you check your app or you check your phone. That's comfort of seeing those numbers there and thinking, even though, as I said, and this is quite a common thing that I do see a lot of times, is even though that money is there to help you to reach whatever financial goal, like you say, business or whatever it is, it's that fear that if we let go, we'll never get it back in, or it'll take a long time to get back in. And that's very hard to kind of process. But again, it comes down to those working with those limiting beliefs and building up the mindset again.
Yeah. Actually, going back to what we were saying about the budgeting for starting a business, we're saying about releasing money and letting go of money. I think when you start a business as well, you think about all the startup costs. But I know quite a few people that are at a similar stage in business as me and haven't thought about the fact that you need to keep investing as you go. You'll just, as I said, you'll budget the bare minimum costs. But a business needs a lot of investment, doesn't it? So
ongoing investment.
We're always told just start, but actually we need to think that it's not a one-time investment.
No, and that's the thing when you think about the profits, isn't it? So when this profits start coming in and it's using those profits, and sometimes, and that's where you kind of need to factor in where you're going to take out the profits. But they do say obviously to try and reinvest those profits to keep growing the business and building it through as much as you possibly can. So I think it's like you said, it's definitely getting used to the investing back into the business in terms of getting it to grow and keep growing, because let's be honest, we don't want it necessarily to just stay flatline, and we want to make sure that it's continuing to kind of serve us and be the best business that it can be. But there's a lot that we need to think about, particularly investing along the way to make it a success.
I wonder where you think that I should start then, because lately I've been trying to be in that abundant mindset. I've been trying to release money, but I've been doing it wrong. So people had told me I need to start delegating, I need to invest in different avenues. And the few avenues that I did pick did not pay off. And so I'm sort of back to square one. Like my confidence has been shaken a bit in that whole money mindset at the moment. So I wonder where you think I should start now.
I think obviously you'd need to probably know kind of what those things that went wrong along the way, and obviously in terms of like advising on that set. But you've got to see, and all of us need to see this, in setting up a business there will be failures. All of us will have to put money somewhere and it won't always generate the right returns, but then you learn from that. I think one of the things is that I would say one of the best investments, I would say, is to make sure you have a mentor in your industry. And I know we spoke about this the other day, but that is probably going to be one of your best investments, because that person has been there. They've done what you've done. They can help you along the journey. They can support you. And if you need to say, I don't actually know where do I need to put this money to make it grow a little bit further? And I think in your business, obviously, it's kind of obviously working with the suppliers and understanding there is that certain amount of money that you're going to put into paid media spend as well. Obviously, there's different schools of thought around that in terms of setting up a business, but a lot of the times you do need to invest, particularly at the beginning, to make sure you're reaching as many people, because obviously there is the amount that you can do for your own earned social channels, but it is putting that additional marketing efforts, and marketing will pay, paid marketing will pay off. But I do think if you can put aside a small, even if it's joining up like for a membership or a mentor who's doing the same thing as you, but being there so that you can ask those questions, or you're in a community with people who can say, guys, I'm a little bit stuck on this part of the business, or I don't know where to invest the next bit, or whatever it is. I think that's one of the things. And that's something I learned as well is, before I even had the idea of the business, I had a business mentor. I did a business program, like from concept to profitable business. And that really helped me in that time, because I was part of a community. We're all in it together. And it actually helped me realize the things that I needed to do along the way to keep the business growing and all the different momentum. But as I said, the most successful entrepreneurs will tell you that their best investment is in themselves, but also in the coach and mentor that they have. Yeah. And so that's where I would say, if you can release a little bit of money to find somebody who can support you where you are in the business and where you want to get to, who can direct you, and perhaps will have those contacts of the right people or the right places where you want to kind of put that money. And even though it's something, and that the challenge that perhaps people may feel is that, well, that's not something directly going to benefit the business. It's not going to generate profit. But actually, that advice is priceless in the grand scheme of things. And that advice is going to help you along the way for those different things. So without knowing the areas that went wrong, I would just say to you, failure is natural. I think there's so many different Stephen Bartlett quotes about failure. I'm sure, but so many wisdom, especially when starting out in business, is to keep going. It really is to keep going, and you will have so many failures along the way, little failures and things, but it's kind of the people who pick themselves up and keep going and say, no, do you know what? I'm putting the energy out there. I know this is the right thing to me, and it will generate money. I need to get it in front of the right people, and I know there's a clear need. And so I think it's just about picking yourself up and being like, okay, that didn't work, but I can try a different one and it's going to work. And if I need, I'm going to seek that advice from those other people who are going to help me and direct me the right way that I can build the business.
Yeah, I think what didn't work for me was when I was outsourcing things, actually. And so I've taken that back and thought, actually, maybe this is a sign that I need to be investing in myself to learn
There you
these
go.
things.
Yeah,
But then
there
there's
you go.
that scale, because you'll hear people say, find the right people to outsource. You can't do everything yourself, especially if you're a mum and a entrepreneur.
It is very true. That is very true. There is a lot around. It is getting the right balance. I think there's investing in yourself and the skills that you can give to the job, and particularly at the beginning. I mean, obviously, as well, perhaps having virtual assistant support. And I don't know kind of whether you've kind of tried that, but there are obviously different companies to kind of support you. If you can go with a reputable company. For those other bits, like you say, in terms of the marketing, perhaps you might need some support there, or the emails, or whatever it is. Like, think of the things, what are the things that I can do? Like, and that absolutely cannot go wrong. And then get those basics right, and then bring those other people in to do the admin bits or whatever bits of the business that you need that support. That, okay, it doesn't need to be 100%, but I just need to do those bits, and they need to be, just make sure you get the balance. And obviously, as you grow in time, ideally, then you'll be able to train those people up to be able to do those skills. But yeah, unfortunately, obviously, it's going to take, and it is hard, particularly I think when you think about marketing yourself and the brand. You have a vision of it in your mind, but communicating that sometimes to someone who can help you, it can be very difficult. But yeah, I think about the areas that you enjoy and that you can do yourself, and then think about the areas that you could delegate. And perhaps if you have to try a couple of times to find someone right, then that's just, you're going to probably just have to try that for the first part.
And I think actually by educating yourself, you can then find the right people, can't you?
Exactly.
Because otherwise you don't really know what you're looking for, do you? You don't know what to ask them. You don't know if they're doing a good or a bad job. So I think yourself is always the best place to start investing, isn't it?
Definitely.
What intrigues me about you, Beth, is that you do all the budgeting stuff and the really practical stuff and the numbers. But obviously the psychology and, I don't know, the more emotional side is really quite different, isn't it? You don't get many people that enjoy both numbers and the psychology behind it. So I'm interested to know how sort of woo-woo, how spiritual you get. Are you into the manifestation techniques and all of that?
So it's interesting, actually. I think there is an element of manifesting, and I think about the part that I talk about is very much about being open to attracting those opportunities of money. And that's where I think that there's lots of studies out there that say if you're positive and you are open and you kind of have that abundant mindset, then you will attract the money in. But I think the psychology of money is psychological. So there isn't necessarily the kind of, like you talk about, more of the manifesting side. That the psychology obviously comes down to proven behaviors and the kind of cognitive biases that we form in our heads in the way that we approach money. I find it fascinating because I just think there's so many different ways. And I love talking about the money personalities. I get really excited about this. And lots of people come up to me like, what money personality am I? And this is kind of like going to your natural sort of things, whether you're a saver or a spender or a hoarder, so as to speak. But there's different personalities and we adapt those different things. And I just think it's fascinating because I think for such a long time, people really haven't had those conversations about how they feel about money, because talking about money is being typically in many cultures a taboo. And so it's only recently that we've been able to kind of think about, that's why I do that with money, because that's how I think about these other things in my life. Or I realize that, and in particular when you go back to childhood as well, I realized that that's how my parents were, and that's perhaps something, or I learned this along the way. And actually, when I realized how the conversations about money, or where money's coming in, for instance, what I'm seeing on social media, what I'm seeing in what people are talking about in my external environment, like the pressures that I'm being, that I have to spend this money, I have to keep up with those different things. And through that, you can kind of actually, once you're aware of those different elements, you can actually work through them and say, no, Joe, I'm going to change this because I know I can be a better person. I know I can do this. And I actually developed a whole masterclass, which has everything all about this, about how you can recognize all those different triggers, and then build up a healthy mindset along the way so that you can be open for wealth. But yeah, I think it's just fascinating because, as I say, I start with the mindset piece in terms of understand your relationship, the way that you approach money and all those different things. Because then once we get that element right, then we can move to the next bit, which is what do you want to achieve with your money? How can you feel secure and happy? And then how do we get you to the next level? And here are the strategies to get you there. So it's mirroring the mindset piece with the practical to get you the right approach.
That's really interesting to me, because I even spoke to Karina on the podcast about manifesting. And I think I'm on my own journey to figure out how I really feel about it. And what you've mentioned there with the psychology behind it, actually, I blooming love psychology. I got an A star in my A-level psychology. So I think this is where I'm veering towards, because I can see the benefit of the gratitude and being able to appreciate where that money is coming in. And obviously then that's going to give you a whole new mindset to go out into the world. And of course, then you're going to act like a bit of a different person that then probably makes money and makes connections.
Exactly.
So tell me about your business now, Finance Her Well, and your mission and what you're trying to achieve with your new business.
Yeah, so I created Finance Her Well very much to empower women to be able to kind of manage their money and develop a healthy mindset. So that's in a nutshell, because so many women that I've spoken to and the statistics out there, so feel that so many women feel left out of financial conversations or nervous to invest and don't quite understand how to kind of save or how to budget, because like I mentioned before, a lot of us weren't taught those things in school, or even if they've kind of been in a lot of debt and they have that unhealthy relationship with money. There's so many different angles that money can appeal. And what I would say about that, and the reason why a lot of the times I do have these conversations with women, is because I do feel that women sometimes have different financial needs than men. And sometimes for a lot of women, it may be that they financially need to understand how to get out of a relationship, or they need to save for maternity leave, or they may be, as I say, setting up a business. There's lots of different areas. And I wanted to create with Finance Her Well a safe space where women can have those conversations and be open, and they don't feel stupid asking those questions. They can feel like they can communicate about it and actually have those open and honest conversations. So that's what I've tried to build through the platform of Finance Her Well, which provides, so I've got the masterclass up there at the moment. I'm in the process of building the courses and then having the memberships where that community will be there for people. And I also want to help hold people to account because that's what a lot of people often say to me is, okay, it's great having the resources, but how do I actually make sure I can put this in place? And will you sometimes hold my hands along the way, or kind of make sure that I am putting that aside, that money that I told myself I would do? And then obviously there's the coaching as well for those more intimate, like one-on-one conversations, and the group coaching. But recently I've been doing a lot of kind of starting to do workshops, and corporate workshops are going into the workplaces where financial wellness is so needed, particularly in this region, but everywhere really. A lot of people feel that financial stress. So there's a lot of work to do with employers to say, if you can provide workshops like ones around money mindset and helping people develop a healthy relationship, and here are the tools and strategies to get you there, you're going to find those people feel confident and supported and less stressed, because financial stress is the number one cause of relationship breakdowns, but also the number one stress of actually employees in the workplace as well. So once you get that right, then you can get lots of different things right. So as I say, there are a lot of different angles to Finance Her Well, but it's just, I say, bringing people along the journey to develop that healthy, wealthy mindset for life.
Amazing. I love it. And I know that just so many women and wives are leaving this all up to the husbands. But from what I've learned in business so far is that the women are the ones that take smaller risks but get better rewards. And I'm really glad that you're doing this and focusing on the women. Beth, I like to finish the podcast now by giving a bit of a shout out to a small local business or a brand. Have you thought of anyone you'd like to give a shout out to?
Gosh, there's so many lovely ones that I would kind of like. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to your brand next again.
Thank you.
So I absolutely, and the reason I give you the shout out as well, my little girl picked up your dresses this weekend, and was just so fascinated. So we're going to buy one of them for our niece. So I just love that you've got such an eye for beautiful clothing and beautiful brands. I almost want to have another baby again, just so they can.
I don't know how many times I get that comment, or the grandmas coming up getting I say grandmas, they're normally women who have got daughters in like their 20s and 30s, and they say to me like they really want their daughter to have children so that they can buy these clothes.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Honestly, it takes me back. It's lovely.
Something I haven't spoken about on the podcast yet actually is that I've added other small mummy owned brands on there as well, so I can give a shout out to Bow Desert, to Giraffe. I've got Royal Bee Baby on there, and who else have I got? Eleonora. So everyone go and
I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, they're really lovely, and all mummy owned brands and local. So Beth, thank you so much for joining me. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, you can find me at Finance Her Well. I'm on Instagram and also on the website, www.financeherwell.com. So yeah, feel free to reach out for me to those different channels. And definitely if you want to do something to change your mindset, I've got the Money Mindset Masterclass ready for you to download and take away.
Great. I'll put all these links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Beth.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you again to Beth for coming on today's episode. I have got a list of things from that episode that I want to now implement, starting from looking at my budget and our finances as a family, but also as a business. And then I really think I'm going to work on my money mindset over summer. And I didn't really know where to start, but I think I'm going to have to check out that online course, aren't I? If you enjoyed today's episode, then please can I ask you to press follow on whatever podcast app you are using right now. That really helps me out. And it also means that I will automatically land in your subs box whenever there's a new episode out. If you're in the market for some baby clothes or gifts or kids clothes, then do check out this new Mums Supporting Mums initiative. You can use code podcast10 for 10% off your order. Have a lovely week, guys.